All right. Good morning, everyone. What a good morning. What a well-dressed audience. I'm over here like checking out your outfits. So this is amazing. Well, I am so honored to kick off this festival today with a really important panel on what money means to you. And as we've already heard, there's a lot of feelings around money, a lot of excitement, perhaps other emotions, and I really want to unpack that with our incredible guests today. So I'm going to just quick fire introduce our guests. First, we have Amy Spiller. Amy is a wealth planner at Barclays. She joined Barclays Wealth Management in 2016 as a wealth planner before moving into training and competency. Prior to joining Barclays, she worked at HSBC for almost 16 years. You don't look it. And then latterly as a premier client manager. She is a chartered financial planner and supports new and existing wealth planners who provide advice to Barclays wealth management clients in the areas of managing and growing their wealth. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you.
We have Laura Whateley, who is an award-winning freelance journalist, formerly a reporter for The Times and the newspaper's consumer champion for nearly a decade. She writes about consumer and social affairs, money, housing, and travel. Her first book, Money, A User's Guide, a handbook to personal finance for millennials and Gen Z, was probably the first about how to start a pension to go viral on Twitter. And finally, we have Davinia Tomlinson, who is the phenomenal founder of Rainchq. After 15 years of working in the investment management industry, she created the financial coaching platform in 2018 to help women take control of their financial futures. As well as offering financial coaching, the platform offers guidance via Instagram to help women build sustainable long-term wealth. We love to see it. Welcome,
you.
ladies. Right. So we've just had a really fun exercise, but I wanted to get our panelists to start off by having a quick think. We've got a group of incredible women here with incredible CVs, but we're also here to talk about money. So the first thing I thought I would ask is to break the ice. Amy, what is your first ever memory of money as a child?
Well, when I was small, my parents and I used to regularly visit my aunt and uncle. And my uncle, who he's sadly no longer with us, but I remember him being a very jolly, bearded, sparkly eyed man. At the end of every visit, he used to dig into his pocket and he used to pull out a shiny round pound coin and give it to me. And I would go home excitedly and put it in my piggy bank. And there was one particular visit that I remember where my brother was there too. Now, I need to tell you that my brother is nearly 20 years older than me. We were both happy mistakes, as my parents like to put it. So at this point, I mean, I don't know, I was maybe 8 or 9, and my brother was clearly working and earning a salary at that point. And at the end of the visit, he dug into his pocket and he pulled out £5 coins, and he tipped them into my hand. Now, obviously I was gleeful, but I remember that, even at that really early age, I was kind of vaguely aware of the emotion that this triggered within my uncle. And, obviously he was really proud of my brother, his nephew, but, I think he was, there was this realization that he had been kind of overtaken by the younger generation. And, in his mind, £1 was no longer going to cut it with me. Now, I can tell you, I'd have been really, really pleased with a quid, but that pound coin was no longer forthcoming from my uncle after that point.
Wow.
And that stuck with me, yeah.
Great memory. Laura, over to you. First memory as a child.
This is definitely going to give away my age, but I think it was the shiny red Abbey National. Did you have this? Passbook was it called? And it was like the first time I went to the bank and I could practice my signature, which I'm not actually sure has changed very much since then. And the kind of thrill of having my own pocket money that I could pay into a bank and that was mine. And I think that feeling has always stayed a little bit, that sense of like, it's mine, I want my own money, and I can do what I want with it. So yeah, I think
Love that.
Abbey National.
Abbey National. Shout out to Abbey National. And Davinia, your
Yeah,
first.
I think for me, growing up in a really matriarchal family, so very strong, powerful women, very typically Caribbean. And I think I had that memory too about going to Abbey National. It's not even Abbey National anymore, is it? There's no such thing anymore. But my gran had a financial advisor. She was the first person in my life, really, that had a financial advisor. And if you imagine that this was somebody that had come across from the Caribbean when she was 20 years old, she'd worked in factories all of her working life, but she'd amassed enough wealth because she had responsibility for all of her younger siblings back home in the Caribbean. She would send money back to them. And she was very good at kind of eking out a living. She had 5 children. She was working. She was managing this family. But she was obviously saving and accruing enough wealth that she had a financial advisor. And he would come to the house. In my mind, it felt like he was there all the time. He was probably only coming he's probably only coming once a month, but he would come and he would sit around the family table and would have dinner with us. So I just remember this like very vivid memories of Peter, and my gran is called Rita. So in my mind, I had this Peter and Rita show like happening all throughout my childhood. And he would come and he'd be like, what's happening? What's happening, Rita? Like, what should we do with your money? And she had PEPs and testers, which of course, again, preceded ISAs, so very old school. But my gran was the first person in my life who was thinking strategically about financial planning. And of course, I never would have thought of it in that way as a child. But I remember thinking, wow, that man's come here to talk to my gran. But my gran's calling all the shots here. Like Peter is accountable to my grandma, and he has to come and report to her as to what's happening with her money. That really stuck with me. And I think, fast forward many years later, that kind of sparked the catalyst for the business that Rainchq has now grown to become. So yeah, that Peter and Rita thing is like a really big deal in my life and in my upbringing.
Amazing. So we've got shiny pound coins, we've got Abbey National Passbook, and we've got Rita and Peter. Amazing. Okay, we're going to keep that in our heads. So to start out, Emily's already said it. Money is power. We're right across from the Bank of England. Guys, please, I'm trying to get a mortgage over here. Like, can we stop for a moment? Money is emotional. Money is play. Money is freedom. Money is so many things to so many different people. And I've spoken quite openly about this with Emily on her podcast before, The Wallet. Sometimes money isn't all those positive feelings. Sometimes money is anxiety inducing. And I've spoken about the huge mountain of debt that I racked up as a young woman, and feeling like Eeyore with this like sad cloud following me around, and that was my debt, and constantly feeling like I'm never going to get out from under this. And it felt completely insurmountable. So, Laura, I'm going to start with you. Big question. Why is it that we have such big emotions around money?
Very big question. There are so many emotions around money, of course. I think, first of all, it's important to state the obvious, but we're in a huge cost of living crisis. And for a huge amount of people, there is just the basic anxiety that they can't pay their bills and they can't meet their basic needs, housing, food, heating their homes. But I think there's a lot of people who still have complicated emotions, even if they have more than enough. And I write a lot about practical guidance around personal finance and trying to help people with some of the overwhelming jargon and millions of different products there are out there. And one thing I think is that we still very much associate, and Emily said this, we associate success, I think, still with financial competence, and because we tend to think people who have got lots of money are financially competent. And as a consequence, I think sometimes you think, well, if I don't have much, or I haven't had a pay rise, or I'm really struggling with my bills, it's my fault. I must have not understood something, or I must not be doing something right. And then that, there's a bit of a shame attached to that. And then a secrecy that comes with the shame. So we don't talk about how much debt we might have, or how someone's bought a house, what our parents' situation is and how that's informed where we are. So I think there is this shame, however much money you have, actually, because there's a lot of secrecy around it. And I'm also really interested in behavioural economics, which I think it shows that we're all too human with how we manage our money. And there's lots and lots of ways that our psychology trips us up. And you like to think everyone's rational and they're going to do the right thing. But most of us aren't. And so I think that's really important to bear in mind when we're thinking about how we invest or how we make sure we've got enough for the future. Actually, understand that you're human and don't, feel like you're messing up and there's no one you can talk to about it, because we're all messing up in different ways.
I think when you said messing up, all three of us kind of went, yep. And it's this idea that there's one right way to do money. I was introduced to this phrase, YMMV, your mileage may vary, which I find delightful. And I always say that to my friends when they come running to me and asking why, I don't know, about financial advice. I'm like, first of all, I'm not a financial advisor, but I always say to them, your mileage may vary because we're all so different and we all have different backgrounds. Davinia, I did see you nodding. Was there something you wanted to add there on the emotions around money?
Yeah, I mean, I think, specifically when it comes to women, there's a lot of research that shows women think about, we're thinking about our money and our financial planning, we tend to tie it to certain milestones in our lives, certain goals that we might have. So it's not, and crudely speaking, when you think about men and maybe they'll have these really lofty financial targets that might just be, for bragging rights or ego. Not all men, but of course, they might think, well, I want to buy a Tesla, or I want to, I've put £1 million into Bitcoin, things like this. Whereas a woman might be thinking, well, actually, I'm thinking about a career break, or I'm thinking about, I don't know, maybe starting a family, maybe starting a business, like so many different things. And I think Emily touched on it at the beginning when she said, we have these kind of hurdles in our mind. By the age of 20, I should have done this, or by 30, I should have done that, by 40, I should have done that. And from a personal perspective, when I think about some of the financial mishaps that I might have fallen into, exactly as you said, people will assume, oh, well, Dav's running Rainchq, so she must really know what she's doing. Half the time, I don't really know what I'm doing, and you're kind of learning on the job. Absolutely. And I think for me, my moment of truth was, I've had a number of moments of truth financially, but, getting married, then having a baby, but then getting divorced, all of these milestones, suddenly the way that they impact your money is different at all of these different stages. And I think it's only by speaking openly with other women about it that suddenly kind of it opens up a conversation. As soon as I started to say to the Rainmakers, for example, I've been through this divorce and this is what's happening. These are the implications financially. And, if you're going through it, these are some of the things to look out for. Don't let your ex-husband take the piss out of you. This is what you need to do. Suddenly, it just opened the floodgates, and all of these women started talking to me about, I've had this experience, and my friends had this experience. So it's really powerful that we can have these conversations, but you can see just, these life stages and these milestones, how they impact us emotionally, and therefore what the financial implications might be.
Absolutely. Davinia, I want to go back to you. So many of you that might work in the corporate world may have taken a Myers-Briggs test. Anyone? Yes, I'm seeing some smiles and nods. Or if you're Gen Z, you might be into astrology, star signs. I'm a Gemini. I don't know any of the other ones. So if anyone wants to tell me what mine are, please let me know. My house rising, whatever, in the sun of, I don't know. There's been an emergence of this phrase, money personality. So I wonder if you could explain to us, what is a money personality?
Yeah, you're right. It's like Cosmo. It feels Cosmo style, doesn't it? Like if you tick all of these different things, it kind of spits out a profile. And I think it means different things to different people. So I suppose that, there are two schools of thought. There is a very academic one, which is around money scripts. And so there are some Stanford academics that have basically devised, based on behavioral finance, these scripts that are basically stemming from our childhood, and they're ascribed to certain behaviors that we might exhibit, certain values that we might have around money. So there are 4 of them. I'm not going to get into all of them, but, for example, we've got money worship, we've got money status. So all of these different things. What is your relationship with money, and how do you behave as a result? And there's a brilliant exercise that you can do. You can find it online, and then you can go through these scripts. But your money personality is effectively, how do you behave with money? What is your relationship with it? What kinds of emotions and feelings does it evoke in you? And ultimately, are you a spender? Are you a saver? Do you invest your money? Do you think long term? Do you think short term? It's all of these sorts of things that I think are. And the thing for me, when we think about our money personality, it's not vastly different from the rest of your personality. Are you somebody that's quite impulsive in life generally? Are you somebody that's quite conservative, quite considered? And also that your money personality is not a static thing. It's so dynamic. We change all the time. So exactly as the example that I gave about these different milestones that I have passed through in my life. Well, of course, my money personality was different at all of those different stages. So I think it's really important that we don't box ourselves in. It can help to guide us perhaps around some of the things we might like to do differently, things we might want to do more of, but that we shouldn't feel wedded to any of these personalities.
So on that note, I'm going to again assign a task to our panel. I'll go first. What is your money personality? So I'll start. I am the founder of a fintech company called Blue Money, and we were doing some video recordings with a bunch of guests, and this woman said that she's a baddie on a budget. And I was like, oh my God, it's me. It's me. I am the daughter of two immigrants. I'm an immigrant here. And so I grew up, I think, with a lot of like scarcity mindset. We always had enough, paradoxically, but it never felt like enough. And it was like back in the 90s when ice cream tubs were made of better plastic, we would reuse them for Tupperware to this day. And so I, to this day, like struggle to buy anything full price. So baddie on a budget, everything I'm wearing was bought on sale or thrifted. That's my money personality. What about you, Amy?
Oh, okay. So, in contradiction to you, I think that I unfortunately have very expensive tastes. And I say unfortunately because I'm not in a position to fund them. If you gave me three choices of, whatever, whether it be three jackets or three holidays or three washing machines, without even knowing the cost of each, somehow I seem to sort of gravitate towards the most expensive option.
That's called great
So,
taste. It's great taste.
I think I've got aspirations of being a spender, but I think in reality I'm actually more of a worrier, and I always know what is in my account. I keep a manual spreadsheet of credits and debits that I'm anticipating, and my husband says it looks like hieroglyphics, but it makes sense to me. But I'm really mindful of it because I think I'm naturally a bit of a control freak, but I think there's a really fine line between me being in control of the finances and the money actually controlling how I think. So I'm battling it, but I think at least kind of being aware of it is the first step into not letting my pitfalls carry me away.
I love that. And Laura, what about you? Your money personality?
I'm definitely a bit of a spender too. Similarly, sort of, champagne tastes. Very, very cheap lemonade.
Champagne specifically.
But also, I think I have a lot of guilt around money, and particularly as someone who's self-employed, freelancer, that is not great because I find it very difficult. I think I associate, I sort of feel like money reflects on me personally, and I'm really interested in people who are like, ask for a pay rise by thinking sort of yourself separately from your personality, and thinking of yourself as someone who's bringing worth to a company. But I find that extremely difficult. So I find hard to ask for more money for work. I really struggle with that. I find it very difficult to, if someone says they're not going to pay me very much, I think, oh, okay, fine. And it's ridiculous. I know I should work on that, but that is something that I struggle with a lot, thinking my worth is attached to earnings a little bit.
Interesting. And Davinia, what about yourself?
Yeah, I was thinking, oh gosh, it's like creeping death, isn't it? By the time it got to me, I'm like, what am I going to say? But I think, I think of myself as quite a visionary in general, but I would probably say I'm a bit of a financial fantasist, and not fantasist in a kind of unrealistic way, but more from the perspective of, like, I will conjure up these big, like, I've always had like a really big imagination, and I'll conjure up these massive ambitions in my mind, and it doesn't matter what situation I'm in today, I kind of lean into that. So whatever's going on in my life, like, in the midst of chaos, I will kind of step out of my mind and into my imagination, and then I start to lean towards that. And then what I find, it's not money manifestation, because I think that's hocus pocus. It's more kind of envisioning what life could be, and then working back from that and thinking, what are the financial steps that I need to fulfill in order to achieve that ambition? So I need that sense of fantasy in order, because if I'm stuck in reality, particularly when reality is terrible, then it makes me feel a bit like I'm stuck in mud. So I have to step out of it and into this fantasy in order to grow. And that, I think, has helped me. Honestly, it's dug me out of many a ditch. So ladies, if you're struggling, fantasize.
In all aspects of life. Amy, I want to turn to you. So you're a chartered financial planner and you've worked with HSBC and Barclays. So I imagine you've seen every money personality under the sun. Um, and I imagine as well with your clients, they're looking to grow their wealth, often to pass that wealth on to future generations. So now we're going to get into the nitty gritty here. We're talking about relationships. How do familial relationships play a role in the way that we view and interact with money?
Yeah, so I definitely have seen a lot of different personality types when it comes to money, and certainly in my latter years as a financial advisor with Barclays, where my client base has been pretty well off. I have helped a lot of people with making plans to pass money down to the next generation. Now, historically, when I've been talking to a parent or a grandparent who's making these plans, generally those plans are to come into play after they've passed. And in their head, the money is going to be used for something life-changing. But interestingly, Barclays did a piece of research recently with parents of 40-year-old millennials, and over a third of these parents anticipate having to need to help their children with an inheritance imminently, like this year, to help with living costs. And then, talking to the children in these studies, the millennials, three out of four that that were involved in the study have already had some kind of financial help from their parents. Where they may have used that money to help get them on the property ladder or start a business. Over 90% of them said that if they had that money today, they would be using it to just pay for living costs, whether it be food or travel costs or healthcare or bills. And, it's just, I think, a stark reflection of where we are today with the cost of living crisis. And even more worryingly, that over 90% of those people were on salaries of £55,000 or above. Yeah, ouch. So, I think that, whilst handing down smaller, regular sums of money can be tax efficient and it can add some flexibility to the beneficiary, you've got to balance that with thinking about the long term. Talking about finances with your family and with a financial advisor has always been important. But I think that, the life that we're living in today with the cost of living, inflation and the energy costs, I think it's just more and more crucial to have those conversations earlier.
Yeah, and I think, so I mentioned I'm an immigrant child. I know there's a few people in this audience who are as well. You have different types of families as well. So, we might have different obligations. I know there's people who probably support their parents. So maybe it's not a one directional, flow of money. Maybe people send money home. It can grow very complex and I often talk to my dad about how when we send money back to India, there's often this kind of like, oh, well, we need a bit more, we need a bit more. And it's kind of like, okay, well, when do we turn off the taps type of thing? And that becomes really complex and with all relationships. So, Laura, plugging your next book, I know that you're working on your next book, which I'm sure is going to be a bestseller. We discussed previously what you were working on and the role of family and friends with money. So I wonder if you could share a bit about how money changes in the context of romantic partners, but also with friends. So not necessarily your family where you're going to love them till the ends of the earth, but maybe romantic partners and friends.
Well, I think, as we were just talking about, I think at the moment and in the last few years, it's become really, really difficult to think about money just as an individual because of the cost of living. So for people who are under 40 particularly, it is almost impossible now to buy a property, to rent a property on your own well, we're all in London, definitely in a place like London and a lot of the most expensive places in the UK. And I think you look at things like the cost of childcare, lots and lots of people need two incomes, and that has changed in the past. Older generations, you could have somebody working with one salary and the other person could not work and you could afford to get by, and that's becoming very difficult. But we're also I certainly feel like this. I know a lot of my female friends do, that we were kind of taught from a young age that financial independence is so important, and it's part of being a feminist, and it's part of feeling free and having the life you want. You shouldn't be reliant on a partner. And so I'm really interested in how we match that up now, because the truth is it's very difficult not to work as a pair, as a team, and how do you have those conversations, and how do you deal with things like you were saying, divorce, having a child, blending your finances, when you also want to feel, well, I have my own money. So there are, like you said, it's very complex. There are no easy solutions, but I think we need to talk about how to have those conversations, and how we share in a way that also makes us feel safe, because we've also recognizing that people are getting divorced, and women are missing out more because we don't understand pensions very well, for example. Or you've got, obviously, I'm so happy that finally economic abuse is being recognized. But how do we protect ourselves against that, and have, funds that mean we can leave unhappy relationships, but also have a nice property, bring up children? So it's really challenging, and something I think we need to talk about more for a younger generation.
And with friends, any thoughts on that? Because that gets complex too, right?
Yeah, and I think there's often a stage, maybe in your 20s, where you've kind of jogged along with your friends, maybe from school, university, and money's never been an issue, and you never really think about it that much because you're all shopping at Nisa or down the road buying frozen pizza or whatever. And actually then you start to realize when you enter the workplace, and then some people buy houses and some people don't, and that gap can really widen, that you sense that it feels often very unfair that some people have a lot more than others, and that can drive a wedge between friends. And I think, again, we need to talk to each other maybe a little more about where our money has come from, so that we don't, as I said earlier, feel a sense of sort of really misplaced shame about whether somehow we're not as successful or as sensible with our money as our friends are, because often it's because we've got, it's to do with privilege and things that happened a very long time ago in childhood that start to emerge in our 20s and 30s.
Oh, absolutely. And I've shared with some friends before that I found it, and Emily's actually posted about it on the Vestpod Instagram about I had a bunch of friends start to buy houses. One of them bought a house or a flat in Manhattan. And I was like, what? I'm sorry. Wait, what? And she was like, yeah, the classic like Instagram post, posted her keys. And then I went and visited it. I was like, wow, this looks expensive. And what she didn't share, and that's her prerogative, of course, was that, her parents had helped her with a deposit. And that's brilliant. And that's great. I'm all about creating generational wealth so that I can do that for my children one day. But it left me feeling with this like, oh man, like everyone's buying a house and I can barely cut rent right now. And I felt a lot of shame. And then you've also got friends who are maybe asking for money, and you have a bit of guilt because you're maybe earning a bit more than they are, and you're kind of going, right, okay, how do we balance this? Going on holiday with friends, if anyone's ever had to pick up an extra bill. Davinia, I want to switch gears a bit and talk a bit about Rainchq. So you have a delightful turn of phrase on your website, and it says, ladies, let's make it rain. You offer financial coaching along with a membership, so you're obviously very passionate about financial empowerment, and you do have different, services. But I wonder, is financial coaching for you the place to start to get grips with your money? How do you approach that at Rainchq?
Yeah, I mean, when I cast my mind back to the genesis of Rainchq and what it was that we were trying to do, coaching wasn't at all on the radar. In fact, it was more about acting as a bit of a matchmaking service between the rainmakers, as I call them, so Rainchq customers, and qualified and regulated female financial advisors. That was really important because I recognized, having worked in the industry for such a long time, that not only were there so few female financial advisors, but also that when I would speak, obviously the representation of women in the client bases of some of these companies that I worked for was negligible. And I was like, well, there's a real problem here, because in my group of friends alone, there are really smart, talented, professional women with money. And it's a bit like, I don't know if any of you have had this experience, but you talked about growing up in an immigrant household. I was the first person in my family to go to university, so everybody thinks that I'm a real boffin. So like when we're watching Countdown as a child, you get to the Countdown conundrum and everyone would be like, Dav, what's the answer? I'm like, I don't know the answer. And that happens to this day. Everyone assumes that I'm the smartest person in the room. Similarly, fast forward into my career, my group of friends would look to me for, Dad, what should I, I've got all this money, I've got a bonus, where should I put the money? And so I was like, well, why can't you see a financial advisor? And they would talk me through the various challenges that they had. So Rainchq was really about trying to bridge that gap. And then for people, I would do a bit of triage with every new rainmaker that would come on board and have conversations with women to see whether, do you actually need a financial advisor, or do you just need a bit of education? Do you just need a bit of content? So it was blogs, and it was kind of little really bite-sized snippets of kind of audio content designed to demystify the world of finance and investing. And then increasingly what was happening is that women were saying to me, actually, we love the content and that's great, but we also would quite like to speak to a person. And we'd like the person to be you, Dav. Like, can we have a chat with you? And so I started to do, small groups that then morphed into this Rainmaker community of women who were a step before needing to see a qualified and regulated financial advisor, but just wanted to have a chat about some of these different things. And I recognized that actually one of my strengths really is in kind of having these open conversations, sharing in small groups. And the Rainmakers know everything about me. They followed me on all of my ups and downs, and relocating out of the UK and getting a divorce, having my second child, all of the things. And I think there's something about that relatability and that authenticity, which is not unique to me. Obviously, the Rainmakers like the idea of this kind of brummy Caribbean person with, full of energy that comes to every session. Is like, right, ladies, this is what we're going to do. We are making it rain, but we're making it rain in our individual ways. This, the world of finance is not unique to men. We have to feel like we are rainmakers in our own lives. We're not going to, absolve ourselves of responsibility for what's happening, and we're not going to devolve responsibility to the men. And this is what we're going to do, and we're going to do it in small groups and coach and champion one another. And it works brilliantly, because what you find is when you speak to women and you are open with them, we feel that we can share. And I think it's in that sharing that there's the power, and we kind of troubleshooting and problem solving between us. So it's a brilliant thing. And of course, just having relationships with Emily and some of the other women that work in this, it kind of opens up the conversation with other women that work in finance. And we share among us about the things that we hear from the people that we work with. So it really is magical.
Amazing. And how lucky are we to have a whole Sunday to discuss money? Amy, I want to turn to you and discuss my Instagram problem. I spend way too much time on Instagram. We live in a world now where, we see it, we want it. I see it, I like it, I want it, I got it. In the wise words of Miss Ariana Grande. And it's so easy to, as we were talking about, scroll through Instagram and feel like, oh, she's in Dubai, she's sitting business class, she's got her Prosecco at the airport, or, sit in business, wow, or she's bought a house. And we kind of start to tiptoe this line of envy. And so I wonder, with your clients, we're probably talking a different level here. It's like, oh, I bought a yacht. And I'm working on that. And when I do, you're all invited to my yacht. But do you see that with your clients, this kind of like, they've got that, so now I want it? And, if we kind of talk about the everyday person, is that a net positive? Is that aspirational? How do you feel about that?
Well, I see it with myself. I am as guilty as the next person for multitasking. Sat on the sofa, eating my dinner, playing dinos with my 4-year-old, keeping an eye on my emails, and scrolling at the same time. I mentioned a study that Barclays did earlier on. The millennials in this study, over half of them admitted to having booked a trip or bought an item off the back of a celebrity or an influencer endorsing it on their social feed, and up to sort of staggering figures, £3 billion in a year, which was equal to an average of £400 per person. And if you're sort of trying to keep up with the Joneses, and the Joneses aren't you, and the Joneses have different aspirations to you, then it's just sort of a self-perpetuating fallacy. We all know, and you sort of see it, and it's hard to, but if you think about it, we all know that Instagram is not reality. And I think it's really important to think about what you as an individual are aspiring to. So I guess my first bit of advice would be, if you are in that position and you are scrolling, if you've got something in your basket, or you've got a number of things in your basket, then don't press checkout that night. Think on it overnight. Particularly if you had a glass of wine. I'm just talking about myself here, probably, but just don't do it. Just wait until the next morning and think, do I really need that? And if the answer is yes, then fine if you can afford it. But it kind of links on a little bit to sort of the second bit of advice I've got around this, and I can't actually claim the credit for this, but a colleague of mine told me something that she'd learned from her granddad, and it was that he used to try and take kind of a rule of three approach. So for every kind of £3 that he earned, he would use £1 to spend on bills. He would invest £1. He would sort of put it into his long-term savings or pension pot, and blow £1. Different days, different times, I know, and I also sort of work part-time juggling childcare because of costs, and there are times when every £3 I have is going to have to go on my bills. But if it's something that you can aspire to, if you know that for every £1 that you blow, that's actually sort of £3 away from the table, because you're looking to try and sort of squirrel some of it away, I think it's going to sort of help you think a little bit more about how important it is on spending that £1, and is it an item that you actually need or not? So not necessarily a net positive looking at other people, but if you can identify what it is that's important to you, then you can turn it into something that is positive.
I like that. I try the reverse Klarna technique, which is to put away little bits and then kind of save up to buying that thing. Or wish lists are my favorite thing now. Then I send them to my partner. I'm like, hey, Christmas planning. So I want to wrap up, as we're coming close to time, but I wanted to wrap up with what I think is the most important question when it comes to what does money mean to you, and that is, to what end does money play a role in your quest for happiness? So Davinia, I want to start with you, so you don't have your creeping death.
I think for me, because I'm always quite clear on the specific goals that I have for myself. So, and a very personal example. So in the middle of the pandemic, I moved out of London to the Caribbean with my 2 daughters. So I spend now half of my time is in the UK, in fact, probably 3/4 of my time is in the Caribbean, 1/4 of my time is in the UK. And the reason that in my mind, money is the tool, as Emily said, it's the kind of facilitator that enabled me to move to the Caribbean. So I was very clear about what it would require and all of the different costs that were associated. So of course, there are the financial costs, but then there are the emotional costs, and, leaving our life here behind and moving away. And could I bear all of those costs? I'm always very clear about, am I in a position to pay the price for what it is that I want to achieve? So I think for me, rather than thinking of money and happiness as being inextricably linked, I'm not one of those people that's like, oh no, money and happiness are not related at all. I think that's ridiculous. Because even if you wanted to live off grid in a hut in the mountains, you would still have to have had the money in order to facilitate that at some point. So I think we have to be quite realistic about that when we say it. So for me, it's the tool that enables me to achieve the goals that I have for myself and for my life. And I'm very, when we talked about Instagram, I'm very clear about what my path is versus someone else's. So it's easy for me to be like, well, Kim Kardashian's doing that, who incidentally was fined for that cryptocurrency example, just saying.
Be careful.
So it is important that we're clear on what it is that we want to achieve and that we strive towards that, but recognize that money is the facilitator rather than the goal in and of itself.
I like that. Laura, what about you?
I just say I agree. Pass the mic. I think often when people say, money doesn't make you happy, it's because, well, it's extremely naive, because you do need a certain amount of money to meet all of your emotional and basic needs, don't you? But I think it's about materialism. And actually, I think we're recognizing, especially after COVID, that and so many long reads about burnout, etc., that actually having enough money is about being able to buy yourself some freedom and think about what that means for you and how you want to work, or how you want to bring up your family, or how you want to have relationships. And actually having lots of money but living a life that, you know, people who've got huge mortgages at the moment because they've got big houses, it's tricky and people get trapped. So I think it's about you know, having lots of money can lead you into a lifestyle that makes you feel like you have to work harder than you want to. So I think it's, like we were saying, about thinking about your goals and what freedom means to you and what kind of life you want, putting Instagram aside and thinking, do you know what, I don't want to go to Dubai, it's fine. So yeah.
Nor do I. And again, in the words of the wise Ariana Grande, what was it? Whoever said money can't solve your problems must not have had enough money to solve it. And finally, Amy, to you.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with everything that's been said here. I think money does make life easier to a certain degree, but equally there are people out there who have lots and lots of money and are completely unhappy. So I think, again, think about what it is that makes you as an individual happy. Money can buy you things that make you happy. It's not the money that makes you happy. For example, I absolutely love the smell of lavender. I find it really, really relaxing. I love, pillow mist, diffusers, whatever it may be. So, I want to use my money to along with my 3 jackets, my 3 washing machines and my 3 holidays, to buy lavender products in various forms to make me happy. So, I think that's what you've got to concentrate on, use what you have to get what makes you happy, not what makes the Joneses happy.
Amazing. And we've got lavender right behind us here. We've got a whole theme going on. Ladies, thank you so much, Davinia Tomlinson, Laura Whateley, and Amy Spiller. Big round of applause, please. Thank you so much.